Rain poured like silver needles across the city skyline, blurring the neon lights into ribbons of gold and crimson. On the edge of that brilliance, where luxury met despair, sat a woman with a swollen belly and trembling hands. Her clothes were soaked, her shoes worn to the threads, and yet her eyes, those deep hazel eyes, still carried something unbroken. Her name was Ilara. Once, she had dreamed of becoming a chartered accountant, the kind who balanced fortunes and saved empires from ruin. But fate, as cruel as it was whimsical, had other plans. A series of tragedies, her mother's illness, an abusive fiancé, and then the betrayal of a friend, had left her on the streets, clutching her unborn child like the last ember of hope. That night, as the rain turned heavier, she took shelter under the marble awning of Sterling Enterprises, the towering headquarters of a billionaire few ever saw, but everyone knew. Alexander Sterling, He was a man made of steel and silence, a self-made titan who built his empire from the dust of his father's debts. But what the world didn't know was that his empire was now cracking beneath the surface. Inside that building, chaos reigned. An accounting discrepancy. Millions gone, numbers not aligning, reports falsified. His team had been at it for weeks, unable to find the root cause. Investors were panicking, the media was circling, and the board was sharpening their knives. Alexander stood by the window, his jaw tight, his reflection a ghost against the glass. And then fate decided to weave an impossible thread. As Ilara huddled under the awning, she noticed a man in a suit storming out, shouting into his phone. A briefcase slipped from his grip, spilling papers into the puddles. Without thinking, she rushed forward to help. Her fingers, despite being cold and numb, moved with the instinct of someone who knew numbers, knew how to read them. She caught sight of a ledger page, one that made her pause. "This entry doesn't belong here," she murmured softly. The man, startled, looked down at her. "What did you say?" She hesitated, then pointed at the column. "This figure. Look, the depreciation schedule doesn't match the capital expenditures. Whoever entered this used a rolling adjustment that hides a diversion." The man frowned. "You're saying this was intentional?" Ilara nodded slowly, her eyes scanning lines of code, numbers, and formulas like they were letters in a forgotten language. "Someone's laundering through your subsidiaries, shifting balance sheets to offshore accounts." He blinked. "Who are you?" "No one," she said, clutching her torn coat tighter. "Just someone who used to love numbers." Moments later, she was standing inside the marble lobby of Sterling Enterprises, her hair dripping, her belly heavy, and her voice steady as she explained her findings to the astonished CFO. Word reached Alexander within minutes. He was skeptical, naturally, but curiosity drew him down to the lobby. When he saw her, pale, soaked, yet sharp as glass, something in him shifted. "You think you found what my team couldn't?" he asked, his tone clipped but curious. "I don't think," she said quietly. "I know." He studied her for a moment, then handed her a tablet and a fresh printout of the company's ledgers. "Prove it." And she did. With fingers that danced across the screen, she unraveled layers of deceit hidden beneath digital fog. Every entry she touched connected like a web, leading to one man, the company's financial director, the one Sterling trusted most. The room grew silent as she revealed how he had siphoned millions into fake shell companies registered under false subsidiaries. When she finished, there was no applause, no cheer, just the stunned silence of realization. Alexander looked at her, really looked at her, this homeless, pregnant woman who had just saved his empire from collapse. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Ilara." He nodded. "Ilara, you just saved my company." But she shook her head. "No, Mr. Sterling. I just saved your truth." He wanted to offer her something. Money, shelter, gratitude. But she was already walking away, her silhouette small against the towering glass doors. Something inside him resisted, letting her go. "Wait," he called out. "You can't just walk back into the rain." She turned slightly, the rain cascading down her face like tears. "I've been in the rain for years, Mr. Sterling. I'm used to it." He took a step forward, the weight of pride slipping from his shoulders. "Then let me change that." Elara paused. There was something in his voice, something human, raw, almost pleading. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe not all offers came with strings. He had her taken to a private apartment that night, a warm bed, food, medical care. Yet despite her gratitude, she couldn't sleep, not because of fear, but because something told her the story wasn't over. And she was right. Because 2 days later, while Alexander prepared to confront the fraudulent director, Elara stumbled upon something even darker, hidden in the archives, a document she wasn't supposed to see. Something that connected Alexander's company not just to financial fraud, but to something far more dangerous, buried deep in offshore records and forgotten contracts that could destroy not only him, but everything he'd ever built. And in that moment, she realized saving the company was only the beginning. Her hand trembled as she turned the page. The ink was faded, the letters uneven, as though someone had tried to erase the truth and failed. The document bore the insignia of an old subsidiary, Helios Trading Limited ***, a name she remembered seeing only once in the ledgers, marked as inactive. But the account wasn't dormant at all. It was moving money, vast sums, to unregistered entities in countries where corporate laws were little more than smoke. Elara's breath quickened. This wasn't just the work of a greedy executive. It was systemic, layered, orchestrated. The numbers whispered of something colder, of human desperation turned into profit, offshore accounts tied to labor contracts, payments to faceless companies, and coded transactions disguised as consultancy fees. The night outside the glass tower was silent, the city pulsing below like a sleeping beast. She leaned closer to the screen, scrolling faster, tracing each signature, each stamp. Then she saw it, Alexander's father's name, Nathan Sterling. Her pulse stuttered. Nathan had died years ago, his death fueling the legend of Alexander's rise. But his signature appeared on transactions dated after his death. Elara? The voice startled her. She turned to see Alexander standing in the doorway, his sleeves rolled up, exhaustion painted across his face. It was well past midnight, and yet he was there, drawn by some instinct. "You're still awake," he said softly. She quickly minimized the file, forcing a smile. "I couldn't sleep." He studied her. "Or you couldn't stop thinking about the numbers." She hesitated, then nodded. "They tell stories people don't want to admit." Alexander stepped closer, the dim light casting shadows under his eyes. "You remind me of someone," he murmured. "My mother used to say the same thing. That numbers never lie, people do." Elara's chest tightened. "She sounds wise." "She was," he said, almost wistful. "She saw through people long before I did." For a moment, silence settled between them, an uneasy, delicate silence that carried the weight of things unsaid. Then Alexander's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face darkened. "What's wrong?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. "The board wants an emergency meeting tomorrow. They've caught wind of the internal audit. Someone's leaking information." "Leaking?" Her voice faltered. "But that means—" "It means whoever we're dealing with isn't finished." His gaze hardened. "They know we're closing in." He turned to leave, but Elara couldn't shake the unease coiling in her stomach. "Mr. Sterling," she said quickly, "be careful who you trust. Whoever did this, they're close to you." He stopped, his back still to her, and for a moment she saw his shoulders tense. "You think I don't know that?" he said quietly, then walked away. When he was gone, Elara turned back to the hidden file. Her eyes burned, her body heavy, but something inside refused to stop. The deeper she went, the clearer it became that this wasn't just fraud. It was a cover-up that reached into the company's foundation. And the one thread that tied it all together was the falsified signature of a dead man. Morning came with the dull glow of a storm about to break. The boardroom was filled with power. Men and women in sharp suits, their eyes cold and watchful. Elara wasn't supposed to be there, but Alexander had insisted. "She sees things you don't," he had told him. The CFO began the briefing, presenting the summary of the fraud they'd uncovered. Screens glowed with charts and figures. Then Elara's voice cut through the hum. "There's something you haven't seen." All eyes turned to her. She stood, her hair neatly tied back, wearing clothes that actually fit. Alexander's assistant had found her something to wear, but even dressed for their world, she didn't belong to it. Her hands rested on the table, steady calm. "There's a second layer," she said. "A file hidden behind the accounting logs. Whoever's behind this used encrypted keys tied to deceased identities, one of them being Nathan Sterling." A ripple went through the room. Alexander's head snapped toward her, his eyes sharp. "What did you say?" She nodded. "His signature appears on posthumous transactions. Someone forged it to reopen a dormant account and route funds through Helios Trading." The CFO frowned. "That's impossible. Those accounts were closed years ago." "They weren't," Ilera said, pulling up the evidence. "They were buried under layers of shell companies. Look." The screen flickered to life. Rows of transfers, coded entries, and digital signatures filled the space. The room fell silent as realization dawned. Alexander stared at the data, his throat tightening. Who had access to these files? The CFO hesitated. "Only high-level executives. Myself, the director of finance, and your late father's attorney." Ilera's eyes narrowed. "The attorney? Is he still alive?" Alexander nodded slowly. "Yes, Harold Graves. He handled the estate after my father's death." Her voice dropped. "Then he's the one who forged it, or helped someone do it." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Get him in here." Within the hour, Harold Graves arrived, a gray-haired man in an immaculate suit, his expression unreadable. He greeted Alexander with the air of an old family friend. "Alex, it's been too long." "Not long enough," Alexander said coldly. "We found your name in some very questionable documents." Graves smiled faintly. "You always were suspicious, like your father." Ilera watched him carefully. There was something too polished in his calm, too controlled. She decided to speak. "Mr. Graves, do you recall authorizing transactions through Helios Trading?" He turned to her, eyebrows raised. "And you are someone who can read the truth between numbers." The faintest flicker crossed his face, a crack in the mask. "I don't know what you think you found." "I think you forged Nathan Sterling's signature," she said quietly, "to reopen an offshore fund that was never declared in this state. A fund that's been bleeding money from his company for over a decade." The room went still. Alexander rose slowly from his seat. "Is that true, Harold?" Graves hesitated, then laughed softly. "You have no proof." Ilera tapped the tablet. "Actually, we do. Digital timestamp mismatches, signature inconsistencies, and trace IP addresses leading to your old law firm server. You didn't even bother to change the encryption keys." The color drained from his face. Alexander's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Why?" Graves' composure cracked at last. "Because your father wanted it that way," he spat. "Helios wasn't just a shell company. It was a vault, a way to move money where the government couldn't reach it. You think Nathan Sterling built his empire clean? You're living in a fairy tale, boy." The word struck like a blade. The room blurred for a moment as Alexander stared at him, the foundation of his world fracturing. Ilera felt the weight of the truth settle, like lead in her chest. If Graves was telling the truth, then everything Alexander believed about his father, about legacy, about honor, was a lie. But there was something in the numbers, something she hadn't shared yet. A transfer sequence buried beneath the rest, labeled with only one word, Elysium. And what it led to didn't match any company, any asset, or any legal record she could find. It was as if the money vanished into a shadow. "Ilera," Alexander said, his voice rough. "What is Elysium?" "And what it led to didn't match any company, any asset, or any legal record she could find. It was as if the money vanished into a shadow." "Ilera," Alexander said, his voice rough. "What is Elysium?" She hesitated. "I don't know, but it's still active." The room filled with low murmurs, but Alexander only stared at her, eyes dark and unreadable. "Find it," he said quietly. "Whatever it is, find it before they do." And in that instant, Ilera realized that whoever had forged Nathan's legacy wasn't done hiding the truth. They were still watching, Rain whispered against the glass again, as if the city itself were holding its breath. It had been days since the confrontation with Harold Graves, yet the echoes of his words still lingered in the walls of Sterling Enterprises. Alexander hadn't slept much since then. Neither had Alara. The truth they had uncovered was only a doorway, a dark, narrow corridor leading deeper into secrets that could shatter everything. Elysium, that single word haunted them both. Alara had spent hours tracing it, combing through encrypted databases, firewalls, offshore filings, and digital dust. It didn't appear in any registry. No business license, no shareholder records, no trace. And yet millions, hundreds of millions, had flowed into it like a silent current. One evening, as the city lights flickered outside, she called Alexander into the analysis room. The large monitor glowed against the dim light, reflecting in his tired eyes. "I found something," she said quietly. He stepped closer. "Tell me." Alara zoomed in on a data trail. Elysium isn't a company. It's a vault, a hidden trust. Its access protocols are locked behind biometric keys. 2 of them. One belonged to Nathan Sterling. The other, she hesitated, is registered to you. Alexander froze. "That's impossible. I've never—" "You may not have known," she interrupted softly, "but the system was designed to recognize your DNA, your bloodline. It's a legacy file." A sharp silence followed. The implications twisted in the air between them like smoke. "You're saying my father left something behind," he said finally, his voice low. "Something only I can unlock." Alara nodded. "And whoever forged his signature knew it. They've been using your name, your inherited key, without your knowledge." Alexander's jaw clenched. "Then they've been inside my world long, before I ever took control." Alara turned back to the screen. "The last recorded access was 8 days ago. That means whoever's using the key is still active. Can you trace it?" "I can try," she said, her voice steady but eyes heavy. "But if I do, they'll know. They're watching every move we make." Alexander stepped closer, his voice softer now. "You've already risked more than anyone ever should. You don't have to." "I have to," she interrupted, looking up at him. "Because if I don't, they'll destroy you. And maybe me too." Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding born not from words but from shared sleepless nights and fragile trust. She worked through the night, fingers flying across the keyboard, eyes darting between code lines and shifting IP traces. The screen flickered violently once, twice, and then froze. A single address appeared. "It's local," she whispered. "Downtown. A private data center under a logistics firm." Alexander grabbed his coat. "Then we're going there." The city was drenched in mist as their car cut through the streets. The building was old, unmarked, its windows tinted black. Security cameras lined the corners. But Alexander's presence as Sterling Enterprises CEO opened doors without question. Inside, the air smelled of ozone and machinery. Racks of servers hummed like distant thunder. Alara's steps were careful, her hand tracing the edges of the console. "This is it," she murmured. "Elysium." A large screen lit up as she connected the drive she'd prepared. The Sterling crest shimmered faintly on the screen, followed by 2 prompts. Authorization, Nathan Sterling. Authorization, Alexander Sterling, ****. Her heart pounded. "Place your thumb here," she said. Alexander pressed his thumb against the scanner. The system scanned, paused, and then a deep mechanical lock clicked open. Data flooded the screen, line after line of files decrypting. But what they revealed wasn't money. It wasn't fraud. It was a ledger of investments, contracts, and names. Thousands of names. "These are charities?" Alexander frowned. "Hospitals, shelters, education grants." Alara scrolled further down, her eyes widening. He wasn't hiding money. He was moving it, funding operations under different names, secretly supporting global relief efforts, rebuilding programs, rehabilitation centers. She turned to him, stunned. "Your father wasn't laundering funds. He was saving people off the record." Alexander's breath caught. "All this time, I thought he was ruthless, cold, but he was protecting this." "Yes," she said softly. And Harold Graves was stealing from it. He used your father's secrecy to turn the fund into his own gold mine. The weight of the discovery hit them both at once. The empire Nathan Sterling had built wasn't born of greed. It was born of sacrifice, shielded from corruption by secrecy. But that secrecy had been twisted into darkness by those who knew too much. Before they could process it further, the screen flashed red. A warning. External breach detected. "They found us," Alara whispered. The door behind them burst open. Men in black suits entered, their faces hard, their movements efficient. Alexander instinctively moved in front of Alara. One of the men, Harold Graves himself, stepped forward. His calm demeanor was gone, replaced by quiet fury. "You should have stayed out of this, Alex. You forged my father's name. You stole his legacy," Alexander said coldly. "You're finished." Graves smirked. "You think the board will believe a homeless woman and a scandal-ridden heir? The system's already set to erase that data." Alara didn't hesitate. "Not if I've already copied it." Graves froze. "You what?" "I mirrored every file before we came here," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Even if you destroy this place, the truth's already out." Graves lunged forward, but Alexander caught his arm, slamming him against the console. The room erupted into chaos, shouts, a flash of sparks as a wire snapped loose, and the hum of servers dimming one by one. Alara grabbed the drive and ran toward the exit, clutching it to her chest as if it were a child. Outside, sirens wailed. Police cars rounded the corner, lights slicing through the mist. Alexander emerged seconds later, bruised but breathing. Graves and his men were taken into custody before dawn. The following morning, the world knew. Headlines spread like wildfire. Asterisk, Sterling Empire cleared of fraud. Secret humanitarian fund discovered. Asterisk, the story of corruption turned into one of redemption. Harold Graves' network was exposed, and the stolen funds were restored to the projects they were meant to support. Alara became the center of it all, not as a victim, but as the woman who uncovered the truth. The press called her the miracle accountant. But fame didn't tempt her. She stayed quiet, watching from the background as the world finally saw Alexander not as the heir to a broken legacy, but as the man who chose integrity over wealth. Days turned into weeks. The storms faded. The city began to heal. One evening, as the sun melted into gold over the skyline, Alexander found Alara standing on the terrace of the Sterling Tower. She was holding her newborn daughter, tiny, fragile, yet fierce-eyed like her mother. "She's beautiful," he said softly. Alara smiled faintly. "She was born the night they arrested Graves. I named her Hope." He looked out over the horizon. "Fitting. You brought hope to more people than you realize." "I just did what needed to be done," she said. "Numbers told a story. I just listened." Alexander turned to her. "You could stay, Sterling Enterprises could use someone like you, someone honest." She shook her head gently. "I think you already have what you need, and I've got a little one who needs me now." He nodded, though something in his eyes softened, a quiet admiration, perhaps even something deeper. "At least let me help you start fresh. A home, education for your child." Alara stopped him with a look, calm and kind. "You already gave me something better than that." "What's that?" "A reason to believe people can still be good." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved through her hair, carrying with it the scent of rain and renewal. As she turned to leave, Alexander's voice followed her. "Alara, if you ever need anything at all," she smiled over her shoulder, "I'll find you. Numbers have a way of leading me to the right place." He watched her disappear in the crowd below, her figure small against the endless city. But somehow, the world seemed brighter for it. In the months that followed, Sterling Enterprises transformed. The Secret Elysium Fund was made public, dedicated to rebuilding lives, not hoarding wealth. Alexander led with transparency, often crediting an unseen hand that had guided the company back to its soul. And sometimes late at night, he'd look out over the city lights and wonder where Alara was. If she still followed numbers like stars, if hope was growing strong, if life had finally been kind. He didn't know that far across the city, in a small office above a cafe. Ilera was balancing ledgers again, this time for small businesses, single mothers, and dreamers who reminded her of herself. On the wall behind her hung a framed quote, handwritten on old paper. Numbers never lie. People do. But sometimes people can change. The paper was signed in faded ink, Nathan Sterling. Ilera smiled at it every night before turning off the lights. Because in the end, it wasn't just a story of numbers or power. It was about redemption, faith, and the strange, miraculous way fate brings together two broken souls. Not to fix each other, but to remind the world that light can still be found in the darkest corners. And somewhere in a city that never stopped breathing, beneath its towers and its rain, a legacy continued, not of wealth, but of truth,